On a crisp autumn afternoon, November 13, 2005, the industrial skyline of Jilin City in northeastern China shattered. At the No. 101 petrochemical plant, a sprawling complex from the 1950s, two massive towers erupted in a series of violent explosions that roared for over an hour. Mushroom clouds of thick black smoke billowed into the sky, visible for miles. The ground trembled. Windows in homes up to 200 meters away were blown out. This wasn't just an accident. It was a catastrophe that would expose the dark side of China's economic boom. The plant, operated by the state-owned China National Petroleum Corporation, was a hub for producing volatile chemicals like benzene and nitrobenzene. That day, routine maintenance went horribly wrong. A blockage had formed inside the P102 processing tower. The plant's monitoring systems, designed to prevent exactly this kind of failure, didn't work. In a desperate and improper attempt to clear the jam, a worker used steam pressure. This rash decision ignited the disaster. Highly flammable and toxic nitrobenzene vapors had built up inside the tower, completely unchecked. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the first explosion tore through the unit. It triggered a terrifying domino effect, engulfing adjacent towers in a sea of fire. The inferno was immediate and merciless. 5 workers were killed instantly, their bodies later found amidst the twisted, scorched metal. A 6th person would die from their injuries shortly after. More than 70 others, including plant staff and residents from nearby neighborhoods, were rushed to hospitals with severe burns, shrapnel wounds, and respiratory damage. Panic ripped through Jilin City. As sirens wailed, authorities began a chaotic evacuation of over 10,000 people. Families fled their homes, grabbing whatever they could. Students from the nearby Baihua University and the Jilin Institute of Chemical Technology were herded to safety, leaving behind a scene of rattling aftershocks and the growing dread of what was in the air. Firefighters battled the blaze through the night, a heroic effort against an unyielding chemical fire. By dawn the next day, the last embers were finally extinguished. But the victory was hollow. The real disaster was just beginning to unfold, silently and invisibly. The explosions had unleashed over 100 tons of lethal pollutants directly into the Songhua River, a vital waterway that snakes through the entire province. The primary culprits were benzene, a colorless carcinogen known to cause leukemia, along with nitrobenzene and aniline. The Songhua River, already bearing the scars of decades of industrial runoff, was transformed overnight into a flowing river of poison. A toxic slick, 80 kilometers long and 30 meters wide, began its relentless journey downstream. The city's water plant was shut down immediately, forcing terrified residents to either boil their water or line up for trucked-in supplies. In a desperate attempt to dilute the poison, upstream hydropower stations released massive amounts of water, but it was a gamble against the chemical tide. By November 21st, the toxic plume reached Harbin, the provincial capital and a metropolis of 4 million people. The city's authorities made an unprecedented decision. They shut down the entire water supply for 4 days, the longest blackout of its kind in Harbin's history. The city ground to a halt. Streets were filled with long queues of people desperate for bottled water. Schools were converted into makeshift aid centers. Factories went idle, hospitals rationed their supplies, and whispers of a government cover-up began to grow into a roar of public outrage. The crisis didn't stop at the Chinese border. The Songhua River flows into the Amur River, which runs through Russia. Officials in the city of Khabarovsk scrambled to stockpile water and monitor the approaching contamination, declaring the incident an ecological invasion that threatened another 7 million lives. In the immediate aftermath, the official response was one of denial. Jilin Petrochemicals told the press that the explosions produced only harmless water vapor and carbon dioxide. No toxins, they claimed, could have possibly escaped. This was a brazen and dangerous lie, and it unraveled quickly. Satellite images and independent tests soon revealed the horrifying scale of the chemical spill, igniting a firestorm of criticism in China's usually tightly controlled media. For a brief moment, the censors loosened their grip. Headlines across the country lambasted the poor work of local officials and demanded accountability. The investigation revealed a grim trail of deception. Plant managers had delayed reporting the accident to their superiors. Jilin authorities had suppressed warnings to protect the region's economic image. Even the city of Harbin only learned of the approaching toxic slick a few days before it arrived. The central government in Beijing could no longer ignore the crisis. Premier Wen Jiabao ordered a high-level investigation. The State Environmental Protection Administration, or SEPA, dispatched teams to try and contain the damage, using floating booms and activated carbon barriers to absorb the chemicals. But the damage was already done. The human cost extended far beyond the initial blast. Benzene's insidious nature sparked widespread fear of long-term health effects, like cancer and blood disorders, for anyone exposed to the contaminated water or air. Ecologically, the river's fish populations plummeted, and the habitats along its banks withered and died. The economic fallout was immense, with cleanup efforts costing billions of yuan. China National Petroleum Corporation was hit with a fine of over 100 million yuan for its negligence. The scandal led to a series of high-profile resignations. The head of SEPA, Xi Jinping, stepped down, effectively becoming a scapegoat for a crisis that had been years in the making. The mayor of Jilin, Zhang Wenyu, took his own life in early 2006 amid the fallout. 4 mid-level officials were sent to prison for their role in the disaster and the cover-up. But from these ashes, a reluctant phoenix began to rise. The Jilin explosions tore through the veil of China's rapid industrialization, exposing a system where breakneck growth had far outpaced environmental safety. The sheer force of public fury, amplified by international outcry, pressured Beijing to finally act. In the months that followed, SEPA launched stricter audits of chemical plants and established new emergency response protocols. The disaster was a direct catalyst for the 2008 amendments to China's Environmental Protection Law, which mandated real-time disclosure of pollution data and imposed much harsher penalties for cover-ups. The incident even reshaped international relations, forcing China to share spill data with the United Nations and Russia, fostering a new, if uneasy, era of cooperation on managing transboundary waters. Today, nearly 2 decades later, parts of the Songhua River run clearer. Monitoring has been strengthened, and regulations are stricter. But the scars of 2005 remain, a stark and enduring reminder that progress forged in secrecy often explodes in tragedy. The people of Jilin and Harbin, once unwitting victims of their own country's ambition, helped forge a new legacy, one where silence is replaced by scrutiny, and where poisoned rivers finally whisper warnings before they roar. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world.